Howdy. Welcome to Ausgrave Royalty. I am Justin. We are here for another video in our ongoing video series on archetypes by Dr. Anthony Stevens. This is part 5, The Father and the Family. In the last video, we talked about the mother archetype and how in the nature of the mother-child bond and how it's the primary archetype that we encounter in our lives, and how that we're biologically wired to have some sort of mother archetypal figure in our lives to be able to actualize that bond. And if that bond is not actualized, then there's potential for neurosis. But yeah, I encourage you to check out that previous video, as well as all of the previous videos in the series, for the optimal context on what the hell we're doing here. But it is encouraged, not required. Thanks for stopping by all the same. So, talking about the father and the family. Oh boy, a lot to cover. So, this one is easy to understand, I guess, easy to hear, hard to swallow. For me, and having been through the manosphere, a lot of this information is quite heartbreaking. I kind of get that sensation that like I'm living in the timeline that sucks. In terms of society and family strength and unity among the sexes and all that. This book was written in 1983, or was published in 1983, so the zeitgeist in Stevens's time must have already been present to prompt him to be writing this. So I was born in 1985, which means that, like, I was born in decay, in social decay. I mean, I guess everyone was to an extent, but with the rapidity that society changes and hearing that a lot of rot was already there in the 80s. I'm a history buff as it relates to the topics I'm interested in, but I don't go seeking out history like just raw, not connected. Just, I wonder, I'll learn about this history now. I'll encounter something like a myth, an Egyptian myth, and then I'll learn about Egyptian history. I won't just start with the Egyptian history, you know? But yeah, so I could be. I'm probably late to the game here, but if Stevens is writing about this, and this is published in the 80s and all that, this was already well underway. And talk about not set up for success. In a way, it's very liberating. Because at 37, you have complaints about the world and you wonder, am I weak or is it really that bad? And I'm not a fan of the victim mentality, but I do think sometimes there are real victims. And this part in particular got me wondering, like, about all of that. So without any further build up here, let's go ahead and get into it. So we're talking about the father and the family, and I can't not bring up Molyneux again, Stefan Molyneux. I've talked about him a lot on the channel. Again, he, I guess, inceptioned a lot of these ideas, but for me personally, but he put being a father and the value of being a parent at the center of philosophy. I have never heard of any other philosopher that really put parenting at the center of the body of thought. That's his main contribution. And he also introduced me to Dr. Warren Ferrell, who's one of my favorite people on the internet right now, advocating for men's issues. And yeah, he's just an incredible dude. Got to check him out if you haven't already. I'll leave some links below. But yeah, he was actually a feminist, like part of the feminist party back in the day, and has since been, as the pendulum has swung in his too far to the other side, potentially. Warren has had the discipline to recognize the shift and act accordingly for the truth, which is that men are having huge issues right now as a whole in society. But yeah, he articulates that better than I am. He has books and stuff. So yeah, go check him out. So this is, again, having been through the manosphere and heard all this from Molyneux and Ferrell, my blood is just boiling. Like, listen to what Stephen says. Remember, this is published in 1983. This could be published today, all right? So he says, a well of advanced literature has grown up in recent decades on the significance of the mother-child bond. Fathers have been relatively neglected. However, it is surely going to However, it is surely going to too far to assert, as some social scientists and women's liberation expand on, that fathers are largely irrelevant to the well-being of their progeny, that their sex is immaterial, and that their only useful contribution to child rearing is to function from time to time as a breastless mother substitute. Ouch. Ouch. Was this written yesterday? Like, so he goes on, such a degree of contempt for the paternal virtues would contrast sharply with the clinical experience of psychiatrists and personal experience of most of us, that the fathers do indeed have great influences over the lives of their sons and daughters. Jung believed that the father plays a crucial psychological role in the destiny of the individual. My viewers in the manosphere, you know what I'm thinking right now. Yeah, I have in my notes, like, again, this was written in 1983. Maybe you replace the word women's liberation with feminism. So he continues. And now we're getting into more of the meat of it. But I feel like vindicated that a luminary like Dr. Anthony Stevens is like seeing this happen. So he says, as far as the growing child is concerned, Jungians all agree that the father archetype is activated later in the ontological sequence than the mother archetype, though rather vague opinions are expressed about when this may be said to occur. Jung was of the opinion that the father archetype showed little sign of activity until about the 5th year, but they thereafter assumed greater influence over the developing personality than the mother archetype, and that this influence persisted well into puberty. As we shall see, however, there's good reason for supposing that the father becomes of considerable importance much earlier than Jung believed. And this is something Molyneux expressed as well. While not so valuable, maybe in the very early years, as the child ages, the father becomes more and more important in significance. And he had some good information about how empathy is developed from the father, as like we all come out of a mother. So the father is the first like other being we kind of know, and how we interact with that other has a crucial role to play in the development of mirror neurons, which are responsible for empathy. And what's tragic is that there's only a small window for that to occur. If you miss it, that's where you get like psychopaths and other disorders. So, would you, dear viewer, would you say that fathers are celebrated in our society, or do we have a prevalence of single mother households? Again, it's the bad timeline, potentially. So, moreover, fathers play a critical role in gender identity. So Stevens talks about this. The presence of the father during the first 2 years of childhood was critical if the development of a feminine orientation in boys was to be avoided. Yeah, I have my notes here. This is incendiary stuff. Let me know in the comments below to what extent father absence is at play in your life. And what effects might result. We talked about archetypal frustration. And again, it's not so much having to do with a particular individual father. It's that the father archetypal role is fulfilled, like being a father, being there for the child. He goes on. So Jung articulated that it is through the father-child relationship that gender consciousness emerges. Slowly, the boy comes to recognize that his bond to the father is based on identity, while the girl comes to appreciate that it is based on difference. The girl, therefore, has to make no readjustment to her original sense of identity with the mother, while the boy has to undergo the revolutionary transformation from mother identification to identification with the father. Lack of a father makes this transition hard and sometimes impossible to achieve. Many studies, this is 1983, many studies confirm the high incidence of sexual confusion in boys who grow up without fathers and the relative absence of such confusion in fatherless girls. There is no problem for the women, for the little girls. There are massive problems with the little boys. Furthermore, girls who grow to maturity without fathers may have few doubts that they are women. But when it comes to living with a man as his partner, they can feel hopelessly lost and unprepared. The father's influence over the development of his children extends far beyond the question of sexual identity in relationships, however. In the great majority of patrilineal societies, he acts as the bridge between family life and the life of society at large. By representing society to the family and his family to society, the father facilitates the transition of the child from the home to the world at large. He encourages the development of the skills necessary for being a successful adult at application. So, for being a successful adult on application, while at the same time communicating to the child the values and the mores prevailing in the social system. That he performs this function is no mere accident of culture. It rests on an archetypal foundation. Inasmuch as he succeeds in this role, he sets them free from their involvement with the mother and fosters the necessary autonomy for effective living. For her part, the mother's expressive function continues to provide the emotional support and security, enabling them to go out and meet the world's challenges. Okay, we've said this a lot already in the previous parts, that your family life largely dictates how you view the world and the society you live in, how secure you feel, how trusting you are, that the world is a reliable place, you know? If you do not have a good family life, aka, to use Stevens and the Jungian phrase, if you get archetypally frustrated by not having the actualization of a mother or father archetype adequately manifested, then there are gonna be disruptions and neuroses that'll probably tragically lead you to analysis and therapy, and in an optimistic outcome. And right. And we have a part coming up that talks about more that talks more about how societies are largely the ocean of the collection of like drip drops of the archetypal manifestation or lack thereof of the individuals involved. So yeah, like if a society is made up of individuals, those individuals have probably a lot of archetypal frustration collectively, and that can cause disruptions in society. And again, like if you abuse like an animal, which is horrible, and then you like just set it out into the world, what do you think, you are literally causing a danger in society. Now, if you do that writ large and there are bad practices or bad modalities or fads, like feminism, I'll just say it, that it's like a thought virus, and how that, imagine the archetypal frustration in society in 2022 must be ridiculously high. It's again, kudos to the Manosphere and Stefan Molyneux and other creators for articulating this. Warren Ferrell, yeah, especially Warren Ferrell. But yeah, it's tragic. It's the tragic timeline. And so, again, I'm learning about all this with y'all, and please, I'm not an authority. I say this every video. Do your own research, all right? And I really encourage it. Again, this is like early 80s. How are people not screaming from the rooftops like this information, It's heartbreaking, honestly. But I'm sending up the flare. I'm doing my part. So please go check all this stuff out for yourself. Given time, moving on to the family now. Oh, well, one thing about the father. We'll have much more to say about the father archetype when we talk about King Warrior Magician Lover, the book by Robert L. Moore. That'll make up the next video series I'm planning. So yeah, there will be much more on this, trust me. So, assuming, no, I'll do it anyway. Whatever the success of the channel. So, we will now move on to the role of the family. Oh man. Out of the frying pan into the fire. All right. By the way, if you're not getting knocked on your ass right now, I'm not doing my job. So get ready, okay? So again, this is early 80s. So Stephen talks about the family and begins by saying, once upon a time, and not so long ago, the family was regarded as a sacred institution. Marriage sealed a lifelong bond between a man and a woman, the purpose of which was the procreation and rearing of their children. In recent decades, however, the family has taken a severe battering. Rapid social and economic changes attendant upon that the Industrial Revolution have resulted in a disintegration of the traditional extended family with its built-in emotional and social support systems, while architectural fads and the fantasies of post-war town planners have turned our inner cities into psychiatric disaster areas by shattering the kinship networks that formerly held people together within distinctive territorial bounds. I'm going to pause here real quick. This is why I'm an anarcho-capitalist, by the way. And Molyneux, again, he had a great video about how the psychology, I'm going to call it the psychology industrial complex, for lack of a better term. Like, TLDR, a lot of the homeless population have severe mental issues that need treatment, but are not able to receive it for various reasons. And he has a whole presentation. I'll link it below if I can find it. But yeah, into psychiatric disaster areas, by shattering the kinship networks and tying this directly to family. Again, family is an archetype. When you hear the phrase as an archetype, you should think, oh, we have a built-in psychobiological readiness to expect that when we are born, we are going to enter into a family type environment where there's a mother archetype and a father archetype energy available to unlock our own archetypal potential, and so on and so on. So, he continues. All this has coincided with widespread dissemination of the narcissistic belief that every individual. It's so tragic. Sorry. All this has coincided with the widespread dissemination of the narcissistic belief that every individual has a right to personal fulfillment which transcends the vows of marriage and which justifies the termination of marriages in which such fulfillment can be adequately found. As if this were not enough, the family has also come under ideological attack, being held responsible for the systemic exploitation of women and children, and stigmatized as the cause of practically all psychiatric ills that man is heir to. This is... It is as true as it is tragic. Brutal. So he goes on. This is kind of interesting. So in Soviet Russia, it was decided to free the family of all legal constraints. Registration of marriages were no longer obligatory. Birth control is advocated, and legal abortion freely available on demand. Divorce was easy. Free love accepted, and no rules or regulations were tolerated concerning how couples should behave to one another or to their children. And yet, as Maurice Hindus records in his book Mother Russia, the family remained. I'm going to pause here. Ooh, that's heavy. I was tempted to make a smart-ass remark like, that's very similar to what we have now, except like marriages were no longer obligatory, or like registration. It's very close to that, except the courts favor women only, not men. So, and this isn't me. Don't take my word for anything. Go look that up. But there's a documentary I think called Divorce Court. So in a way, it's like kind of worse than Soviet Russia for men. Interesting. Yeah. Maybe I'm misreading that potentially, but that's what came to mind. Yeah, so yet the family remained. Its roots were never shaken and were never in danger of being torn out. Despite easy divorce, the right to free and frequent abortions, the overwhelming, massive Russian humanity in the villages, almost all of them fell in love, married, and even when they did not record the union at the registration office, they stayed married. They raised children, they built a home in the best way they could. They chose of their own accord to continue the ancestral habit and tradition of family life. That the family should prove to be so tough a survivor is not perhaps surprising when one considers that it has probably existed since our species began. Anthropology demonstrates that the family formation is a universal characteristic of mankind. That's what I was thinking about. Sorry. Back to the Soviet Russia thing. Man, I wonder if only, maybe potentially the Soviet Russian authoritarians would have dreamed that they had Tinder. That's, that would destroy. That would be a good experiment, Anyway. So, different cultures favor different kinds of family, it is true. But all societies support family ties of some sort or another, where at least one man and one woman care for children, whether they be on their own or not. It seems, therefore, that the family is the expression of archetypal functioning. Its very universality and persistence indicates that the family is biologically established as a species-specific characteristic, and that it is only secondarily modified by cultural or ecological factors as to the indigenous form that it takes. Basically, we're wired for families biologically. We're wired to expect being introduced to a family upon birth, and that how those families manifest in their unique ways is not very relevant. So, only have a few minutes left. We'll get through this passage and we'll sign off. So, the compromise selected by nature was elegantly simple. Pregnant women were caused to go into labor after a gestation period of only 9 months when the baby's head was still sufficiently immature to pass through the pelvic opening. This sensible solution gave rise to logistical difficulties, however. For a minute, that in comparison with the offspring of other mammals, human babies were in the state of considerable prematurity. Who's to feed and care for this helpless but promising creature? The answer, of course, was the mother, as it has always been throughout the mammalian kingdom. Some form of protective alliance is necessary for the care of the offspring in animals like man, monkeys, and apes, where growth and development of the young proceeds at a slow pace, and adult skills must, to a greater or lesser degree, be learned. However, despite this extensive variation, all primate populations have one feature in common. Invariably, a strong bond is formed between a mother and her child. What varies is the degree to which the male involves himself in the relationship, but that he does involve himself with females in forming relatively permanent association for the care and protection of infants is not open to question, Stephen says. And it is a characteristic more commonly found in primates than any other mammal. No less important for survival and no less an extension of our primate nature is the differentiation of function which has always existed in our species between male and female partners in the familial bond. This division of labor freed women to devote their energies to the indispensable business of bearing and rearing children, while their menfolk played politics, waged war, hunted game, and brought home the protein, so as to feed and protect the mothers and the children for whom they accepted responsibility. It is highly probable, therefore, that for as long as our species has existed, and wherever on the planet populations have taken up their abode, children have been reared in families. We're about out of time. I'm going to stop it here. Much more to say, just scratching the surface. Thanks for sticking with me thus far. Useful links in the description. Comment down below. Anxious to hear what you think. This was jam-packed. See you next time. Bye-bye.